Hey, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. I hope you have had a wonderful week so far at the AECtech Conference, and specifically for this Fireside panel discussing how AI will be transforming the future of the built world. Before we begin, I would like to thank our hosts, Ramp, for the beautiful space, help setting up. Couldn't have done it without them. And specifically want to call out that if you have any questions about Nomic as a firm after the Fireside panel today, please do visit the booth in the back. My name's Chris. I'm happy to help you. Today we're joined by three leaders that have been working to shape the future of the AI world. So let's welcome our panelists. So first we have Theo Galanos from Aurecon Group. Theo is a generative AI leader at Aurecon, a global design and engineering consultancy. He leads the global implementation and integration of generative AI across all stages in project delivery at Aurecon. Thank you, Theo. Next up, Rob, I think many of you know already. Rob from Thornton Tomasetti is Chief Technology Officer and founded the firm's Core Studio to drive advanced computational modeling, AI, and R&D across the built environment. He brings decades of leadership in structural design and special structure innovation on projects totaling billions of dollars. Thanks, Rob. And then finally, Andre Mouliar. Andre, CEO and founder of Nomic. Nomic is the domain-specific AI platform for the built world. Our domain-specific AI models are trained to understand project data like drawings, enabling built environment firms to accelerate tasks across all phases of project delivery. Andre founded Nomic after dropping out of his machine learning PhD at NYU. And with that, over to our host, Ben. Thank you.
Hello. All right, so Chris has actually discharged our obligation to thank our hosts, Ramp, here. But Ramp, if you don't know what they are, they're a company that maintains billing services. And so one of the things that they do reimbursements, and they're able to track how different industries are spending money in different areas. And they recently put out a report about how different industries are adopting AI in their spending patterns. And one of the things that they found was that the AEC space was one of the spaces with the lowest levels of adoption. Only, I think, food services had less. About 30% of AEC companies were spending some amount of their budget on AI services, even simple things like meeting transcriptions. Now, the people here are at companies which are not just in the 30%, but the 1% of that 30%. So I think what I want to start off by asking about is, when you make the case for using AI inside of your company, what are the stakes that you lay out? Like, why is this something that you have chosen to invest in, and how have you made it succeed where you are? Theo, maybe.
Sure, yeah, thanks. First of all, hi everyone, thank you for coming. It's very nice of me to be here, both in the event and in New York. So yeah, that's a good question. I think at the beginning, like, the most important aspect is, apart from like realizing the moment and the moment in time and how important sort of that shift in technology was, it was actually having the vision and sort of like strategic vision, right, coming from leadership in a way. And once that happens, then it's just like understanding the momentum of the technology and allowing a team of people and thousands of experts, really, to actually explore and create within the business. So that's kind of like the simple recipe of how it happened, right? Obviously, there's a lot of like specifics of how you do it, of the kind of like knowledge and intuition you need to have through learning and trying, of the ecosystem that you need, which is something that very early on we actually realized, and that's why we partner with very innovative companies like Nomic. And also, at the end of the day, kind of like, yeah, not being afraid to sort of like think of transformation. And not, like, this I think is the first time that actually I can see a sort of digital transformation with AI. So like not being afraid of like think of that, right? And put from the beginning as a goal, not just like, you know, optimization or efficiency, but like how can I actually transform part of the business or how we actually deliver work, right, to our clients. So that's kind of like how it happened, really understanding the moment and then just going all in a way. Yeah.
Robert?
Yeah. I mean, when we first started to play around with large language models, and whenever OpenAI was first released, we first started using it really just for search. And anybody who has dealt with the conventional intranet search engines, they're just absolutely terrible. And so what happened was in our firm, people just didn't use it. It was just kind of like, here's an internal resource that has all these references and smart things that people have said in the past that you could not find. So it was a useless tool. So once we realized that Gen AI is essentially like a big brain with a really good memory, and engineers, we're an engineering firm primarily, so could get information, when they needed it. At the right time, it became, a business case for making significant, improvements to how we work.
Yeah, I'm probably the least qualified to answer this question because I don't run a architecture engineering firm. But we have the advantage of being a smaller company in that we get to bake AI into everything that we do. So for instance, our engineering teams at Nomic, something like 60% of all of our production code is both written and tested and validated with AI systems nowadays. And a year ago, that was pretty much like maybe 0% because we weren't using tools to be able to do this. So smaller companies have a really big advantage where they can adopt this stuff. And larger companies have to go through significant sort of, I think, like here's today and here's the transformation we want to be at tomorrow. And there might be some dips you have to go through in the across finding that new local minimum of how the company can work.
Robert, you mentioned Gen AI, but I think like both Andre and I have been in AI before Gen AI was the only thing on the scenes, and I know that you've been using it for longer than that too. And I wonder, for both you and Theo, how do you think, could you go back a little bit and talk about what AI adoption was like 5 years ago, before this Gen AI moment, in the sort of stuff that you've done with non-generative AI and the value of that sort of stuff now and maybe in the future too?
Yeah, I think what was under the radar, what got me into AI to start with was Google Translate, actually. When I saw that, read about how they did it and what it can do, it's superhuman, right? It's superhuman what it can do. And people were like tagging it as AI. It was like, oh, here's Translate, use it on your phone. You can, look at a menu in, in Italy and, translate it right on the fly. So that was what got me interested. And what actually got me into actually developing the tools was the concept that you can take a smart data set that is produced by the smart people in your firm. AI, machine learning is essentially a heavy-duty version of statistics, and you fit a curve through there, and then all of a sudden you have this smart sort of knowledge base that every engineer has access to. So in a way, it's kind of like having the 100 principals in our firm, access to the 100 principals in the firm whenever you need it, which to me was very valuable because normally you get like one, and maybe you'll get like 10 minutes a day of that principle. So that was what was valuable to me.
Yeah. On adoption, like it's interesting because obviously, like I think there was a sort of zeitgeist moment with ChatGPT, right? And everything seems, or like most people seem to think that's where everything started. Obviously, it didn't. Like I believe like we started a few months before sort of like exploring the models but I think at that moment it really got the attention of people, and suddenly you had a conversational interface that is almost like a magical toy sort of thing, right? I can ask anything and I can converse and I can, so that was really important. There was a gap of like understanding how to use that technology. So I think 3 years ago the first hire in my team was a prompt engineer. Which was an interesting role in an engineering firm, but the whole purpose was let's go around and actually show people how to use, right? How to properly, perhaps create something more complex than a chatbot experience, right? And as this progressed, technology progressed, the systems we used, and again through our ecosystem, our partnerships, the models became much better. So suddenly you could do more complex stuff. We also developed infrastructure around that. So I think we slowly became to the point where you can actually do useful stuff in a consistent manner, almost deterministically. And that's the second wave that is happening now of adoption, where people, and I feel that's the best part about workflows. You have workflows out there, everyone's talking about workflows. The best part about it is that you all build the workflows, like we don't build the workflows, like the experts do it. And through that process, that's where I see true adoption. Like, first of all, even from the first sessions, they understand kind of like what the workflow means, because it's their problem. Once they come out of it, they own the technology, they own the whole experience, and they actually have 1,000 more ideas of how to do it. So that's kind of like the story, the two moments of adoption. And there is a lot of like, obviously struggle and effort between, but those were the two important moments. Yeah.
Theo, I'm kind of curious. So I know you mentioned to me that Aurecon had a pretty large data science team before data, like generative AI was a thing that every company had to talk to their board of directors about, right? Yeah. What was the kind of impetus to really drive that expansion? I think at Aurecon in 2023. Actually double down into it.
Yeah, true. We did have a big data science team, and I believe like they were actively involved in projects and client-facing sort of teams. So like, but I think the transition, like most of that before that, mostly, right, it was really quantitative data, and engineering is a lot about that, right? We have a lot of quantitative data. We can optimize, we can maybe explore, very few people explore anymore, but you know, you can do a lot of stuff, right? But I think that shift came from actually being able to like actually do things with qualitative data, with unstructured data, like also kind of like, oh, I can actually have these two systems interact with each other without doing much, because I have this, again, almost magical filter in between that translates. Like, so I think that was the change, right? Suddenly some tasks that were either very difficult or really awkward to do, like imagine like, even the simple tasks as like sentiment analysis, right? You would do like some sort of BERT and word counts, and you know, it felt very nice, but suddenly all that became, oh, I can actually interrogate the data directly with my expertise and a model, and I can figure out ways to see sentiment. So like, I think that was the shift, actually. And then when that happened is, we realized that we can, okay, across the project lifecycle now we can do things. Because like, there is a lot of design in project delivery, but there is also a lot of reporting, a lot of like back and forth in emails, and there is a lot of like understanding your history and what happened before. So I think that was the big shift, yeah. The ability to sort of interact with unstructured data, not exactly. There are difficulties there, but at least we could do the first steps, yeah.
And then everyone has a meeting note taker.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, teams to notes, yeah, to meeting notes.
I wonder if both of you could go into some specific cases where you found in the second wave of AI adoption in the last couple of years, where you've been able to have some real success integrating AI into some of the workflows that maybe already existed at your company, or bringing some new stuff in that you weren't doing before.
Yeah, I mean, I will say one of the in many ways, Gen AI specifically, there's less of a barrier because of how easy it is to sort of engage with, and the executives can do it as well. It wasn't like you needed to be a computational modeler, knowing Grasshopper and all kinds of tools. It was just like, just ask it a question. Ask it a question that you actually know the answer to. And if it gives you an answer that is right and potentially expands upon your knowledge at the current time, I do that every day, actually, right? Then the value starts to, light bulbs start to go off. So what we did in our firm was we use a different application. It's a nice application. It's called Glean. It's basically ChatGPT for our internal resources. We did a pilot program. So we started with a smaller group, all different facets of the company, different practices. And what was surprising was everyone used it differently. So it's not one of these things where like it's pigeonholed into one specific use case. You can use it for a lot of things across the realm of a project. From winning a project to doing research, to asking it code questions, all throughout the project to find out who the subject matter expert for a particular topic is in the firm. I mean, all throughout. And that's the power of it. It covers everything that we do as a business.
Yeah, on my end, I think I have maybe two quick stories. One is our first sort of like, I like to call it AI native. I don't know if it's true or if people understand actually when I say it, what that means, but our first AI native sort of project with a client, that was a big moment because it was a sort of like test of, again, it's a transformational technology, so you need also like to change the way you approach projects, what's your business model, how do you actually interact with the client. So like, it was a big electrical grid operator in Australia. We helped the connection inquiries with the energy transition, that's a very big problem, and it's actually delaying the actual transition and the energy that we need. And it was really unique project because, first of all, we were testing our strategy, completely different. I don't know if it's different, you all can tell me, but like shared IP in a project with a client, I don't know how often you do that. A project about an AI product and not really a delivery or a report or anything like that. And it was also like a testament of like testing those approaches, testing like the ecosystem, and we are not, this is like much larger than a single company. We need experts across the world that are really good to go together, and it was really good. The other nice thing about the project was how the client actually transformed. They were actually very mature. The first discussion I had with them, I remember very, very, very vividly because I tried. I think they were discussing about what do we do with designs, like generate, and it took me back to my architect stuff. Anyways, like I was thinking like language models and representation, creating designs, and like I thought, okay, now they're gonna hang out, you know, close the call. Like yeah, that's what I was thinking, but maybe we start simpler. So they were very mature in a way, and through that process, as we were finishing the first stage of the project, they were literally, oh, now we can do this. We can also do this. So it showed me the same thing I see internally. Like they went through that pilot initially project, right? It's a smaller test. They really opened up in what was possible. And then the second use case is internally, similar process. Like we have a platform where we deploy workflows. It's not really about the platform. It's really about the workflows. And the thing that I appreciate is like, again, how much the teams engage with this technology around these workflows. And also, this is my favorite, and I think you touched on it a bit just now, like how robust these workflows are, because everyone tends to think this is automation, right? This is a workflow automation. Not really, right? It is a workflow that does a task, but it's kind of like capable of doing it in a noisy space around that task, and it's really amazing to see like things being robust to like small changes, right? Like small data quality issues or things like that. So, and also how amazed also we all are and users are by that. Like, oh, it actually worked. That's, you know. Anyways, those are the two main stories. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about these aha moments. Like, what are the like these road to Damascus where people are like, oh, this actually is going to work for me. And for all three of you, Andre, I'm curious, like where you've seen people who may have been skeptical about AI come to say, oh, wow, it actually worked on this problem. It's actually not.
Yeah. Well, like, with a lot of the firms that we work with or that we talk to, they come in like various levels of maturity. So sometimes we might like start talking to this 100, 200 person engineering firm. They bought 10 licenses of like ChatGPT for Business or something like this. And everyone's using it for generic QA, email writing, maybe have some meeting notes product or something like that. And then you have folks that you got in a call with them and they're literally like building their own custom GPTs, have their own like N8N workflow builders, and these are like engineering firms, just like, you know, really, really innovative folks at those. And across this maturity spectrum, everyone sort of like coordinates around the same problems, I think, which are the problems that either require exploration. So this is, how can I discover new information that I don't currently have? Problems that are like a review. How do I review materials that are deliverables that a firm is producing, right? You know, you're sending your drawings to the permit board, you're doing a 15% check or something like this. There's constant review that happens, and that's all tasks that are in distribution of AI models right now. And then the actual last part, which is frankly the part that really scares people and gets a lot of the really senior people upset, which is the drafting part. No one likes having their RFPs fully drafted, right? You like things getting researched for you, and then the humans go in and do it. And in those breakdowns, I think adoption is just like all over the place around firms of various sizes. It's not tied to even the size of the firm. A 10-person firm might be way more advanced than a 250-person firm. It's like who's the owner, who's actually driving the innovation there.
I think my aha moment was recently when we had like a executive like planning discussion, and one of the principals in the firm who I always thought of as like the most significant Fred Flintstone in the office. He says he uses it every single day, you know, and so I was like, holy, I don't know what he's using it for. I mean, I don't even care actually, but you know, when he told me that, you know, that was like a complete 180 in terms of like, you know, a guy that would never touch anything technology, you know, because I will say, you know, one of the things that we have to face as engineers is the risk factor. Architects as well. And so there's always like, we have to get around that somehow. And, we have an AI policy and we try to get around that. But there's still going to be that risk. There's still going to be that person that does something, kind of stupid. And but you have to balance risk with the rewards of what it can do. And I think, when I saw this person using AI every day, that amazed me, actually.
Yeah. There's this I think counterfactual that a lot of folks have. It's that the older people at your firms are the ones who are like least likely to adopt the tech. That's fundamentally not true across everyone that we worked across. Oftentimes it's the people in their 30s who just don't really want to innovate because they're doing their job and they don't want to adopt the new tech, are usually the biggest blockers actually, or the biggest non-adopters.
Yeah, definitely.
Funny enough.
Yeah, on aha moments, I think I can say a personal one before the professional one. My personal was it 2020? Like DALL-E came out, and then I want to say 20 or 21. Like we were in a community, the typical Discord channels, fine-tuning weird stuff, and I fine-tuning an architecture DALL-E, and I pressed the prompt.
DALL-E's the image generation.
Yeah, exactly. The image generation model. Sorry, the first one, the original one, right? And it obviously like blew everyone's mind when they saw it, and I was like, well, maybe it works for architecture. And like I trained and I pressed the first prompt in a terminal. Out comes a design. It's terrible, right? It's like pixelated, but it's actually a layout. It's literally the layout that I asked. I was like, okay, that was the aha moment that there's something here, right? I remember back then I was presenting like the semantic revolution or something. Some weird titles, but that's what I saw, right? And then in Aurecon, the first aha moment was like the first, obviously like our sort of enterprise platform. Like I assume most enterprises have them. Recall, right? Everyone got access. Like how like the first time people used it, how amazed they were. Like that first instant of like, oh, suddenly I can ask and I get grounded information. And then in the sort of workflow space more recently, I don't know if it's an aha moment, but kind of validation was, I think we had a workflow around a very complex report, very sensitive one that takes a lot of time, and like we made a workflow around it, and I could, out came the first draft, and I send it to the experts, right? They never respond, they never give feedback, and I'm like, hey, did you have a chance to look at it? By the way, feedback is very difficult, right? And the person was like, oh, is this the report? I thought it was the one I sent you. So that was the best feedback, was because like I knew we had something there. We created something they couldn't tell that it was AI generated. It was exactly like they wanted, but they wasn't motivated to like say kudos. They just said, oh, I actually thought they were. So that was the aha moment, like we have something there, even if it's a simple relative task in the many tasks that we need to do. Yeah, so that was that.
Yeah. If I could actually give my actual aha moment, because I don't think I answered the question. So when developers first got access to like language models like ChatGPT, this was like 2 or 3 months after ChatGPT launched, the developer API launched. And you had access to like GPT 3.5 Turbo via like a developer API, and then you can go in and have the model generate out for you something. And then about 6 months later, companies started going in and figuring out ways. First, users were figuring out ways to make the models tool call things, retrieve information from other sources, bring it into the context of the models. And like that was like kind of lame. It didn't really work well. You'd burn a bunch of tokens. And then what people realized is like this is the actual way you make these models reason and plan over longer horizons. And the model companies started post-training agentic tool calling into the systems. So now when you use like Claude 4.5 versus GPT 3.5 from 3 years ago, these things have been trained on billions and billions and billions of tokens in agentic environments that OpenAI has purchased. And what this means is these models can be given tasks and then crunch away for very long periods of time to actually solve that problem, as opposed to just given a prompt and then 10 seconds later produce out a response. Yeah. So to me, one of my biggest aha moments was actually getting to use these things for the first time. I think that the first time it really worked for me was with agentic coding, where you could let the model crunch away for 5 minutes, and with the right constraints, like it actually solves your programming problem. But now we see this like even in our product, where you can give it a set of artifacts, like a spec and like a sheet where it can take notes while it's writing, and you let it crunch away for 10 minutes, and it's like 80% of the way there of what a human would do. And that's just like that step function increase in these capabilities that have been owned by the model layer as opposed to owned by the actual client layer. So like the customers building with the developer APIs was one of those surprising things like that was counterintuitive to me in building in the last 3 years.
So this is sort of the success stories here, but obviously, as I started off saying, like the adoption in this industry is not through the roof at this point. And I think one of the things that some of the questions that the audience brought in was about some of the specifics of the data layer in architecture, engineering, and construction industry firms. Like, I'm curious how you think about the data that AI works on in this industry, what it doesn't work on, what you think it might be starting to get better at working on when we look at the next couple of years.
It's definitely better at math. When it first, ChatGPT first came out, it was pretty crappy, right? It was like you would ask it a question about math and it didn't do a very good job. Now it writes a Python script, like on the fly. It works directly with Excel. It could work with Rhino, actually, if you actually asked it to. Because I think there's a Python library for Rhino. So what it does, what it keeps doing every 2 months, every day, seemingly, is just growing. And so if you're an optimist, like I am most of the time, I get excited about this stuff. What's next? What's going to come next? I think it's kind of what we're here for today. But the adoption is always going to be an issue. But I will say, the AI, at least the basic search function and that we use, is our most widely adopted tool that we've ever touched by far. Hundreds of thousands of uses, which we can't get close to in any of our core tools. We wish, but we don't. So yeah, it's a universal tool.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the last point. I think we started treating these models as sort of like answer generation machines, right? And it's not our fault. We were given a conversational interface, like Andrew said, before we got the developer API to play. And actually, it's going to be, I think one of the hardest things the next few years is actually weaning people from the chatbot. Like, it's going to be crazy. But yeah, I think the biggest realization is like actually understanding that they're not that. They're actually information-seeking machines. That's what Andrew said. Like, you give Sonnet 4.5 a problem and a simple hammer, and it will go out for an hour to figure out the solution, right? Like, and once you understand that, then I think users, especially engineers, react to it much more positively, right? Because they really don't want answers. Like, someone said it, either Europe or Andre, like, they want to ask something about something they know, and they can validate quick. Or I'm a new graduate, and I want to learn something new. And I'm okay if it's a bit wrong, right? I will learn something, and I'm critical enough to not believe everything. But nothing else. So we need those kind of things. And to be honest, it is hard, right? Our data is hard. You probably know it too well because I keep talking about that and you keep talking about that. Like, they can't really understand properly the multimodal aspect of engineering documentation. There is a gap there. Like, code is in distribution. That's why Sonnet is so good. Design, not yet. Engineering, not yet. There is a middle ground there of, like, I think, like, if we manage to play in the right representation. So, like, what if we give design as code, for example, which is actually possible, or what if you give it geometry or like coordinates or metadata or a BIM model, which is a database. But until then, there is a gap. And that gap, I think we need, I think, experts both on our side and on the AI side to help solve that gap, right? Like, and help build models that understand the type of data that we have a bit better, so that we can build workflows on top of that actually generate the right data for the models that we need. I don't know if that makes sense. It's almost like
How many folks in the audience here ever heard the term like context engineering? It's like a little devy, techie term that gets used. But what that basically means is these models are only as good as the information that you give them and the information that you can pull in when you're using them. So for example, a product like Glean, right? Enterprise search. It indexes all your Teams channels, all of your SharePoint documents, all of these data sources, and allows the model to put the right time to pull that data into context to give you an output. The problem starts to be is when you're working in domains and you're working on problems where it's really hard to put a piece of data into the model's context. Take like a drawing sheet, for example, right? Highly multimodal, 2D slice of a 3D object, maybe even a 4D phenomena, right? And how do you make the model be able to react to that kind of information? This is where like a lot of the frontier actually is in terms of making these systems work. You can go in and build nice little workflows over top of a Teams message causing something to start the workflow, or over top of a document that's like an invoice, which is a nice table in it. But what happens when you have a 200-page, 300-page drawing? And that sort of data frontier is where we spend a lot of time focusing at Nomic, but I think is where a lot of folks should, when they think about what these models are capable of and what they're not capable of, think about them by their boundary points. Where is the place where things break? Because that'll teach you a lot about the actual underlying system that they represent. And like what Theo was saying around like systems like Claude 4.5 right now that have these agentic capabilities, they can go in and keep crunching away and putting more and more data into their context. But if they can't represent that data well and they can't context engineer it well, it becomes useless at the end. And the end application doesn't work. And ultimately, the end actual human does not get augmented by the system. So
If I can have one comment on the data side, like, and I wonder what people will think about that. I said like we need to change the way we think about business model and value, perhaps. And what do we usually sell, right? We sell projects and artifacts.
Sell tokens.
That will happen forever. Yeah, okay. But on our end, like, we don't sell tokens yet. It's always a project, and it's for a good purpose, right? We build things that last. We build like structures and bridges and tunnels, right, and ship loaders. But at the same time, every single day, we generate probably thousands of interactions, like long-term interactions of this kind of data that are missing from the models. And I wonder when that will become an actual asset, right? And the thing that excites me about platforms like yours is like obviously closing the gap to enter into that space, but also what if I then operate in a platform like that where everything I generate from now on is ready, is indexable, is parsed, it's easy to understand, is maybe something we can train on. And yeah, when does that become as valuable as I don't know if that happens ever, but I keep going to, to other places that has happened, right? There are obviously companies that create this sort of data and like monetize. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but we actually do it every day. That's the interesting space where we are. Like we shouldn't suddenly monetize our data, like obviously not, right? We sign agreements and NDAs, but we also create very useful, very scarce data every day, and we should use it at the very least for us, like to create better models and tools. Yeah, so that's
I would say the challenge of all that is that people don't. There's a professional bias in the industry, or any industry for that matter, about you build up your experience over time, and that becomes sort of your armor. And in order to sort of disseminate, to get the data out, you have to actually either write it down, you have to tell people or something, and that becomes then, again, the senior people in offices get a little nervous about that. Like, that's my secret sauce. If I give away my secret sauce, I'm no longer as valuable as what I built up the last 20 years. Having said that, it's also really hard to do, which is why, for our AI conventional machine learning models, we've done it mostly synthetically, because if you forensically go through a project and try to figure out why someone made that decision, it could be anything. It could be the client, looked at you sideways. It could be, something that just doesn't make any logical sense or engineering sense, but it's there. And so that's do you throw that big piece of data out? It's hard to do, but so I think it's going to be, in the future, it's going to be a combination of those things. Like, I think, high level macro data is very good for projects. At the element level, it's going to be a little tricky, but so humans keep that stuff inside for the most part.
Yeah, so the other big place I always see is there's like the complexity of individual data points. So like, a 200-page, 300-page structural drawing, like a data point, right? But then there's also the quote-unquote messiness of the distribution of those data points, right? That same drawing, you might have 80, 90,000 different copies if it's a multi-year project, right? But those are all still stored, and a naive system that you onboard to it, or you just give AI access to that project folder, most likely it's not going to be pulling from the final construction drawing set, and then that's basically useless, right? So there's like these, I would say, functional nuances as well across how projects are delivered in the built world that make it very difficult for the promise of sort of AI that other industries are experiencing to actually get. It's not just the data complexity.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder if I can ask both of you, like, I think like we always think about it, and maybe I've said this way too many times, as like data curation, but hopefully no one knows me here, and it's the first time you hear it. Like we always do data curation.
He's from
right?
Australia, no one.
We curate, we clean data, right? We index, right? But it's like trying to put out the fire that never goes out. Like that's what I mean by like, what if we do data generation processes that are just good, right? To your point, right? Think of like an RFI in a project, right? I'm just going to say the typical situation. You literally read it. It's like, as we discussed in the previous meeting, no context ever, it's gone. See the attachment, it was never downloaded. What should we do? This is literally the knowledge of your project 3 years later, right? So even the person who answered that RFI is going to see it like, I don't know, like something, you know, like even they can read the trace and maybe they can see the final response, they won't really understand. But what if you had systems around all these processes that kind of do it? And to your point, they need to do it for you. Like, I won't expect people to actually, oh yeah, make sure to press the button or like make sure to index, right? They need to just happen. But what if they happen? Like, that's kind of like, maybe it's my dream, I don't know. But that would be like a sort of living memory of your expertise in that sense, right? And yeah, anyways.
So one of the things that's come up a few times is both the internal obstacles that Robert was talking about. People have some suspicion about this, but also the important roles that your experienced people play in driving adoption, that you've got these pilot projects where you're bringing people in who are leading it. I wonder, like, what makes for successful collaborations, successfully engaging the growth of AI at your companies? How have you done that effectively?
Well, I think what we haven't leaned on is, for lack of a better term, is peer pressure. So our industry is largely driven by peer pressure. If some boss hears about their competitors using this tool and they're getting this much benefit, et cetera, they'll like, oh, maybe I should look at that. It's the same goes internally. What we try to do is tell, not if I say something, everyone's gonna be like, oh, Rob's just talking about AI like, again, right? But if one of the engineers says it, tells a story about how they used it on a project, the client was happy, et cetera, then the other engineers start to think, oh, maybe this is something that I could use on my project. So we try to get the stories out from the actual users and not the developers of the tools.
Yeah. On our end, to add to the peer pressure, there's also like the pressure of utilization and like actually being on projects and doing. So like the two things that I think we did very well is like, first of all, decouple the team that sort of tried to lend and empower people. It happens to be my team, from that burden. Like, here's your space, try and do things, support others, right? Without, a percentage goal in mind, right? Just support. And then the other thing that really worked is actually finding those translators and like the people who were kind of like curious enough to literally try the technology with us. And of course, they're SMEs, right? They already know the problem we're trying to solve. And they weren't the ones that were solving it, but they were the ones in the meeting kind of trying to literally translate, right? Like literally tell other people that are like, what is this? Like I would try to explain, people would be like, and then they would explain in their own words. Like, okay, I get it. So like that's really important. And also for me, realizing that I can't really be that. Because like we have, I don't know, 30 capabilities, or how we call it. I don't even know one of them. Like, I'm not an expert in one of them. How can I speak to all of them, right? So that was very, very important in a way, those two things here.
Yep. So what I see doesn't work is going top down and shoving it down everyone's throat, because that's not how people adopt tooling that helps them work better. Our sort of like best successful clients have been the ones where you had bottom-up adoption with a couple of engineers, maybe a couple of developers that said, I want to try this tool out. And then there was sort of organic growth that kind of went from there. Anytime everything's been top-down, some CIO comes in and let's do this pilot, let's get things up and running. Oftentimes it's like pulling teeth to get people to try things, to get people to experience stuff. So the most successful implementations that we have are always the ones where we got some bottom-up sort of desire that ultimately resulted in me having to convince one of the C-suites to go through the pilot. But like, there's that perspective. And I think this is a really big example of this was actually, Aurecon, we've been working with them for a little bit over 2 years now. And you know how I met Theo? I met Theo through a Discord message. actually 2 years ago. It was like in our community like developer Discord for the
That's
company.
where AI is, yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, "Do you guys have enterprise options for what you're doing?" We were like a lot smaller back then. We were just building some AI models, so like that kind of bottom up adoption is what leads to, I think, the most successful outcomes. And it's definitely been, at least in our experience, the case.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add one more thing there, like we have, I don't know if you have, I should say, I should ask, but there is a culture of like vendors, right, in the industry. We have vendors and big vendors and onboarding vendors. Like from the beginning, my first thought, like, there are no vendors in AI, first of all. There can't be, it's so new. We need partners, and that actually works. I don't know if anyone tried it or if you want to try it, that sort of partnership worked. And of course, it won't work with everyone. Like both parties need to be in a partnership, right? But when it works really well. That was my kind of like, maybe it was lucky or something, luck, but that's how it worked, yeah.
So something else that came up a lot in the audience questions was how trustworthy AI is. And I think I heard this in Robert's like initial encounters with ChatGPT. And I wonder, like, how do you come to trust AI? So one of the questions somebody asked about was like, AI models are probabilistic and you don't know what they're going to do. And engineering is an extremely deterministic field where you need to know that something is going to happen the same way every time that it runs. So how do you engage with that when you're working with architects and engineers who are not necessarily coming with an assumption that an AI model is going to give them something that they can trust?
Yeah, so that's a real issue. First of all, everyone here knows that there's sort of two sort of personas when it comes to AI. There's the people that try it and says this thing sucks. It's just never going to do what I want it to do. The others like see the the shining light and say this is amazing, right? Right. So you have to deal with that issue if you're going to get. Particularly if you're going to get adoption. But I like to, and I think I mentioned this before, I like to ask questions that I know. And I will say that that's one of the challenges for younger engineers is prompting, sort of prompt engineering, if you want to put it technically, is very, very important of how you ask a question. Because if you make any sort of sense of, leave gaps out in your question, in your prompt, which again, we're not used to prompting to an AI, right? We're used to asking a question to an expert, and so they read between the lines. AI does not read between the lines. So it's actually harder for younger engineers because they may not even know the right terminology to ask. So it's tricky. It's almost gonna take training, just like any other training is going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Like definitely training, it's a big barrier. And one other thing, like that sort of, you mentioned the two, it's interesting you mentioned the all in and all out sort of approach. I used to actually make this point back then with DALL-E when I was presenting sort of like architecture and stuff, because already back then that sentiment was even more than now, right? It was like, this is the end of everything, this is amazing. And my point was like, both of those sides, they're literally forgotten by history. Like if you go back in history, like, I don't know, like I remember Pascal. I don't remember anyone who said like, burn religion or something, burn science or down with religion. I remember Pascal, who has like all this amazing work and was a devout believer or something like. So you always fight in between, right? You always kind of like need to stay in between. So I think that's the interesting part. But in that in between, you need to understand how to interact with this technology. One thing is like I keep telling people is very simple. You need to use it every day. So if you don't use it every day, you're already like not doing it right anyway. But for trust, like the other thing is like we need to start, until the models become more and more in distribution, we need to add determinism. That's my last step, right? Like whenever we can add some determinism. It doesn't need to be all on its own, right? We can add our domain expertise, we can add our tools, like we can add our calculators and our, in a modern fashion, but we can add it in there. And that allows you to embed validation somehow, yeah.
Yeah. Engineers are by far the least fun people to give a live demo to. I'll tell you that. So anecdote from last week. Last Friday, I had the pleasure of getting to drive a live demo to the structural engineering firm, a couple hundred folks. and they have all these like internal standards. They do a lot of single family houses, like really expensive housing, and they have this like standard that they do, which is they always put like extra boards underneath the granite countertops so like the floors don't squeak because like the owners don't like that. And in the live demo, they gave us these like drawing sheets, and they just started going like piece by piece by piece, like, can your model read the dimensions? Can your model do this? And like obviously for half of those things, like AI is not there yet. And if that's what happens is like when that's your actual bar, and you have an individual that you're working with on your team who is using, it's either like letting good enough be the enemy of perfect, when good enough is something that is not something that is needed on a mission critical task, but more of a support task, you're never going to get that kind of adoption internally at a company. So a lot of my job and a lot of my team's job is really expectation setting with organizations for the folks that are the most critical. Set expectations about what's going to be feasible right now, what's going to be feasible in 6 months, what's probably not going to be feasible for a couple of years, right? We're not going to go from your 2D drawing back to the 3D model anytime soon. But like, is it actually needed to like accelerate your firm's ability to deliver what they do and win more work, right? So expectation setting, which is maybe like the continuous form of what Rob just said around the binary side of it.
Yeah, I will say I got excited. I know it was like 6 months ago. When multimodal came out, and maybe it was a year ago, probably now. And I fed it a Bluebeam sketch with dimensions, 2D, but it gave me back perfect DXF, right? That it understood all that stuff. So then I think in my, it's getting there. I'll be able to do plans, and if you can do plans, 3D is just a Z dimension, so you can get there.
There was a sort of interesting question that came from the audience coming in, which I think was another version of the trust question, but a much more hard-headed version of it, which is, how do you actually calculate the ROI on these kinds of investments? If you want to have more, like when you go to say, we need to keep investing as our company in an AI group, like what is the argument that you can make concretely that shows that this is a smart place for a company to spend money right now?
ROI is the $1 million question for anything that we do. I will say one measure is happy faces. No complaints. Complaints is usually like the first thing, like the first 2 or 3 years of our group, it was complaint after complaint after complaint, right? Doesn't do this for us, doesn't do that, whatever. But when no one complains about it and it's sitting on everyone's desk and we're getting 100,000 uses, there's some value there. And, I will say you have to, again, costs is a real issue, but, the cost that we're paying currently is literally like cost of coffee. So if you can invest the cost of coffee for your employees to make them smarter every single day, or whenever they need it, it may not be every single day, that there's some significant value. Who knows what the ROI is, right? But that's a hard one.
That's very real.
It's real.
Yeah.
The answer is
Yeah, it's true. Like I like that sort of soft metric as well. I think like obviously you want to go to the bottom line or something, right? That's what the ROI calculation, and like most people think of it as productivity increase, I guess. And we try to calculate it. Everyone tries to calculate it. I don't think anyone has a formula for that. We just make up numbers, right? At the end of the day, the way I see it is like. And even that productivity goes to like FTEs, and like I don't like a lot of the things that comes out of a company I won't name, but the digital FTE was interesting, and so there is something there in like most people think of like, can we do like 10% less FTE or something, like in a way, right? Somehow the cost of a project goes down. I like to think of it as like doing more in a way, and that goes back to like. Maybe in that soft metric of people being happy, like you don't actually try to squeeze more from people just because you have a few technologies around them, but instead you say, maybe we can do more. Maybe you can all do more, right? You can be more, and we can be more for our clients. We can, have, market differentiation, capture market, do more, all this sort of stuff. And there are places where there's possibly in every domain we all work, we don't have enough people to do things anyways. Like, we don't have enough people for the energy transition. We don't have enough people to build infrastructure. Like, where I am, there's not enough housing anywhere, right? Like, so there's actually a serious sort of call for, like, more. And I think that should be the goal of AI. Yeah.
I'll just add that, I will say the first step in automation, which is not necessarily an ROI, it's actually the engineers produce a better product. Right,
Yeah, I don't like the term ROI. It's like what you have to tell customers when they onboard your product and they start using you. And we do in fact have a table on our pricing page which tries to convey that. But like deep down, everyone who knows their stuff knows that's kind of roughly bullshit. Like it's very hard to measure that kind of stuff tangibly. The way I like to describe it is like lowering the existential risk of your competitors getting advantage of this technology, right? Like that's a lens that I think a lot of people are able to really stomach, because that's a lens with any technological transformation. When everyone was moving to the cloud or moving to investing in computing heavily, right? You still had firms going in and manually drawing stuff, right? Convince them to go in and move to this digital stuff, learn how to use a mouse, do all of that, right? There was gigantic opposition at that time as well. And it's the same thing with this wave of technology too. But I think the really interesting thing is what happens if you don't adopt it. All the firms around you are adopting, and for instance, on the marketing side, they're getting their proposals out 5x faster, right? Because they have AI extracting all the requirements for it or doing the drafting. Yeah, eventually, like you're just going to start losing all the projects, not because you're worse, but because you can't go and keep up with the rate that they're able to go in and do those proposals. Even like small things like that on the overhead side, but then all the way down to project delivery, it all starts kind of compounding. And the ROI is basically keeping your business, right?
Yeah, and even like that on the talent side, right, on human capital, like, and that applies probably to all of us here. Like you said, for example, earlier, maybe a year later, people at Nomic were not using as much language models for code, right? If they couldn't use it today, would they even be there? Like, I feel like we also need like really the best talent we can get to actually deliver the projects we need. And it's with this technology, if you don't have access to technology, if you don't offer the possibility for people to interact with this technology to build, they just won't come. Like that's, yeah.
We're approaching the end of the time here. I want to ask, I think it's the last question, what you're excited about looking forward in the next year, the next 5 years, or even the next 10 years, if you can see that far ahead. Like, what are the areas that you see some really interesting opportunities in, some really exciting work that might just be starting, that's going to start to bear fruition as we look to the next few AECtech weeks and journeys around the sun?
I kind of jokingly show this at presentations, but I'm kind of pretty serious about it. Does anyone remember the little Clippy in Microsoft? Yeah. And you just want to like kill it, right? Kill Clippy. But the reality is with the Gen AI, with MCPs, with all the things that are coming out, agents, that Clippy can actually be really good for an engineer or anyone in our business. Because it'll be someone or something or group of things, whatever, that can sort of guide you through your workday, so you're not banging your head against the wall, drawing a curved line in Revit or something, that type of thing. So I think that's what I'm excited about, actually. Like the tools will be there. Yes, we'll keep building the tools, but it's the guidance I think that AI can provide.
Yeah, on my end, like. I call the workflows like the boring middle for some reason because of a sketch that I keep doing. And I'm very excited for the boring middle. I'm very excited to sort of like build things that really provide value immediately, get buy-in, get people using them, get starting to scale. And then, so that's the practical side of things. I'm very, like the next 6 months, that's the limit of our roadmap. I cannot do more than 6 months. That's what it is, right? We can really provide so much value so fast, and it's right there. And what excites me in the technology is literally, it's a sort of maybe personal ambition, also like hopefully like the firm's ambition to be a small contributor to that in distribution shift of design engineering. Because like I can really see a Sonnet, a GPT, it doesn't matter where it is, some model in 2 years working for an hour to solve an engineering task, and that's amazing. Like. And if we are part of that, I think it's amazing. And I know it's scary. It can be scary, right? Like what happens then, right? You can have that feeling now. I have that feeling now. What happens now? Like, what's my role in 6 months? But I think being part of that is amazing because like it's literally being part of a revolution almost, right? In how things are done. And I do think that we will have roles there, like we will have serious and impactful roles still there. So yeah, that's kind of like what excites me.
Yeah, the way I think about it is, think about what the most skilled, most senior people at your firms do, your principals, right? They're not actually out there doing the work, they're verifiers of the work. They go in and they take the assets being produced by the individuals under them and verify their quality before they get sent out, right? Maybe for the most critical tasks, their knowledge will actually come into play. But their knowledge is always into play when they're verifying things. And this is, if you make the analogy to what's been happening in software engineering, kind of the exact same paradigm that's taken over software engineering right now. Humans have become essentially drivers of agents that produce work, code changes, and then they verify those code changes because the ability to actually write that code, execute that work, is now in distribution of models and the model's ability to tool call to do things. And I really think across project delivery and built world tasks, this is where things will evolve into. You will have, as more tasks across the project delivery process fall into the distribution of foundation models, you're going to get the easy stuff first, the QA, the QC, checking that every sheet has the right title at the bottom right? That's already possible. But as these more advanced tasks come into distribution, you no longer have to say, hey, junior designer, go in and do this thing, go in and do this mundane task. You can go in, have it kicked off, verify that output, and proceed on to the next step, right? Being able to allow for more individuals to have the same level of expertise as that most senior principal at the firm is, I think, the true sort of like promise of the tech. How you get there, all those details, every single year it's going to get better. Right now at Nomic, we're working on really good AI to understand drawings. In 2 or 3 years, that might not even be a problem anymore. Foundation models might be able to might be covering it, right? But the important part is, who is that actual user experience and where is that data actually coming from? That's where our competitive edge is. Right now it's drawings. In the future it's going to be making sure that the workflows that are actually most meaningful and the workflows that are most able to go in and mimic how the most senior principals at firms operate and how they verify work are actually replicated in every single firm. So that's what I at least think the future of AI in the built world looks like.
All right, thanks. If you could all thank our panelists, and let's continue this conversation back outside.